Riverside Writers in the studio with me this afternoon. Adele, you're the big cheese, aren't you, at Riverside Writers, I reckon?
Cheese?
The big cheese, cracking the whip and making sure these guys stay
absolutely ruthless chairperson, absolutely ruthless.
I can see that as the hardness behind the eyes.
We live in fear.
Yeah, I bet
Quite
you
right
do.
too.
There's a hardness to her. You've got a short story for us.
I have. It's one of my fairy stories, and it's called Food.
Go on.
Would you mind picking those up, please, lads? There's a litter bin beside the stile you've just climbed over. A volley of expletives flew back in response. The hiker sighed and began picking up the strewn paper bags himself. "Look at that loser," sneered one of the 4 schoolboys. "Yeah, I know," said another, laughing as he stumbled along the rutted woodland path snaking steeply up Caldy Hill. The other boys were too busy devouring their pasties to reply with anything other than crumb-smeared grins. They turned their backs on the green-clad man and trudged noisily along, deliberately bumping into each other and laughing loudly. "Ray's got cakes!" yelled a stout blond boy as he lunged at the sticky bun. The other 2 joined in the tussle, and the bun sailed through the air and landed in a bramble thicket. Ray punched the shoulder nearest to him. "Now look what you've done. You owe me another. Let's see what you've got." Then he plunged his hand into his pal's blazer pocket to swipe his goodies. The boy resisted, of course, which inspired the other 2 to join in the playful scrum. "Watch it, my iPod's in that pocket." "What have you got on it? Anything decent?" Dan replied, "You don't know decent music anyway." "I bet it's all that girly stuff to impress bandy legs." Dan glared fiercely. "Don't call her that." The other 3 boys roared with laughter, jostling each other as they ambled along the narrow, twisting path. They began chanting, "Dan's got a girlfriend, Dan's got a girlfriend." "Shut it!" Dan hunched his shoulders. "Have you kissed her yet?" asked Ray. "I bet he's not even asked her for a date," said a skinny, black-haired boy. "You've never even had a date, Jack," retorted Dan. "Any wonder," said the 4th boy, "with all those spots." "Belt up, Nigel," snarled Jack, flushing angrily. "At least I'm not fat." "You are." Then the 4 of them crashed into each other again, shoving and pulling, kneeing each other and kicking at unguarded ankles, tugging at hair and ears, bellowing joyfully. They ended up in a breathless heap sprawled on the leafy ground, laughing at new bruises, but still managing to get in a few more prods and wallops. "That weirdo is watching us," said Jack. "What weirdo?" asked Nigel, dusting down his uniform trousers. Dan scanned the shady trees around them. "I can't see anyone." "Up there," said Ray, "on the summit by the bench. It's that hiker who whined about picking litter up." "What's he gawping at?" snarled Jack. No one bothered to reply. They slowly scrambled to their feet and headed off down another woodland path, which would lead them away from the hiker. The man had probably been catching his breath at the top of the hill. The boys picked their way down tricky slopes strewn with red sandstone rocks and woven with ancient tree roots. Overhead 2 jays whirled in aerial acrobatics, fighting over territory, their loud calls dominating all other chirruped songs. Grey squirrels spiraled up gnarled tree trunks, and hidden beneath thorny gorse were the telltale rustles of mice and lizards. "Will the teachers notice we've skipped school?" asked Dan. "Of course not," said Ray. "I do it all the time." "Yeah, and you're always getting in trouble because of it," said Nigel. Ray shrugged. "Who cares? School's rubbish anyway." Nigel asked, "What are you going to do when you leave school?" "Live on a beach somewhere," said Ray. "Laze around doing nothing much." Jack began laughing. "You don't do much anyway." Ray scowled. "I do loads." "Like what?" jeered Dan. "Sit in your bedroom and play on your Xbox." "Hey, there's a pond over there," said Nigel, pointing at an opening through the trees. The boys stomped across the marshy ground to take a closer look at the almost circular pond, whose waters were so dark and motionless beneath the shadows of the trees that it looked like a black mirror. They stood in a row, peering at their reflections. Ray bent down to pick up a pebble, which he threw into the middle of the pond so he could watch the ripples slowly spreading outwards. "My feet are getting wet," said Nigel, and he backed away from the water's edge, his toes now squelched inside his chilly socks. Ray walked away too, but in a different direction, confident that the others would follow him. Jack and Dan did so, but Nigel was staring at one of the trees. "Hey, come and look at this," he said. It's a tree, Nige, teased Jan. You know, big woody thing with leaves. There's lots more like it. Just look around. Yeah, they call it a wood because it's got trees, laughed Ray. Put a sock in it and come and have a look, said Nigel. Excuse me. This tree's got loads of money pushed into its bark. Money, said the other boys as one. The ancient oak tree was laden with coins which had been carefully pushed into the ridges of its rugged bark. Ray reached up and pulled a 50p coin free, then began tugging at another. Come on, let's fill our pockets. Wow, look at all this. We can get loads of sweets for this. I saw it first, it's mine. If those gifts belong to anyone here, said a voice from the other side of the pond, then that person would be me. The boys' heads snapped round, but they didn't stop trying to wrestle free as many coins as possible. Jack said, It's that weirdo again. Have you been following us? Challenged Ray. Ignore him, said Dan, enjoying the increasing weight in his school blazer pockets. Nigel said nothing, too intent on freeing a £2 coin from a fissure in the bark. The tall, elegant hiker slowly began to walk towards them. Get lost or you'll regret it, growled Ray, making his hands into fists. I'm warning you, back off. There's 4 of us and only 1 of you, snarled Jack. Dan shoved another handful of coins into his pocket, then turned towards the approaching hiker, whose long blonde hair hung in a tidy ponytail from beneath his green woolen hat. What are you, hippie or something? A tree hugger? We're not. We'll do you over if you come any closer. Ray picked up a fallen branch that was about the length of his arm. I mean it. Nigel looked worriedly from his friends to the stranger and back again. He did not want any trouble, but he didn't want to lose face in front of the others either. The hiker seemed unconcerned by the boy's angry threats. He walked lightly over the marshy ground around the pond. Only a few yards separated them now. Those gifts were left for a purpose you do not understand. Such things are best not meddled with. You what? Mocked Ray. The hiker said. For millennia this land has belonged to my ancestors. Jack murmured. He's a raving nutter. The hiker smiled faintly. I am the last prince of my people. The gifts which swell your pockets were left as tokens of reverence by those few villagers who still retain some knowledge of my family's residency here. We all live here, scowled Dan. No, you are villagers. The hiker used the word villagers as if it was synonymous with vile, ignorant peasant. Well, just because you live in one of the big houses doesn't mean you own Caldy Hill or this tree, said Ray. Nigel nodded. Just stay away from us. Yeah, we found this money, said Ray, filling his pockets some more, and we're having it, so get lost, or else. The hiker chuckled faintly, then frowned. Such impertinence. Do you imagine I would feel threatened by the grunting of 4 small human animals? He opened his palm and threw a handful of pig nuts towards them. The boys stared at these edible plant roots. Perhaps the fresh air of the woodland had sharpened their appetites. For even though they had already munched their way through meat and potato pasties and sticky sweet iced raisin buns, these crunchy pig nuts looked delicious. The hiker laughed softly. Would you like some more? The boys eagerly dropped upon all fours to scramble after the pig nuts. Greedy for their rich chestnut flavour, they crammed them into their mouths and began rooting around for more. The hiker threw some a little further away from the tree, and the boys leapt upon these also, not caring that their trousers and hands were smeared with mud. All they could think about was the delectable pig nuts that were being cast before them, in a game which they obediently followed down the steep slopes of Caldy Hill, along the ancient drover's lane behind the pub, and through an open gate into a quiet field. The last prince of the Caldy Fae securely fastened the gate behind them, and watched contentedly as 4 newly made little pigs joined his growing herd.
That is well creepy, that, Adele.
Thank
Honest
you.
to goodness. Oh, Adele again from Riverside Writers with more of her scary fairy stories.